The Gaza Strip ceasefire is now at risk. Israel is urging the United States to finally move on to the next stage of Donald Trump's peace plan, since the peace process has simply come to a halt. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that the second phase of the American plan to end the war in Gaza is close to being implemented, but several key issues still remain unresolved. During a joint press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Jerusalem, Netanyahu announced important talks with United States President Donald Trump at the end of the month. But Trump is not rushing to implement the peace plan for Gaza. Instead, Trump is trying to reconcile Israel and Qatar. For this purpose, the United States announced a close meeting between Israeli and Qatari officials today. In addition, the White House is preparing negotiations between Israel and Egypt, since the leaders of these countries have not communicated with each other since the beginning of the war in the Gaza Strip. There are also reports about how Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was giving instructions to Israeli officials and trying to teach them how to interact and live alongside Arab and Muslim countries. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and write any detailed comment. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pichi News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. So, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that the second phase of the American plan to end the war in the Gaza Strip has begun to be implemented, but several key issues still remain unresolved. And during a joint press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Jerusalem, Netanyahu announced important talks with United States President Donald Trump. At the end of the month, on this very topic, Netanyahu once again reminded that it is time to discuss how to finally put an end to Hamas rule in Gaza. After all, Hamas hasn't gone anywhere. Yes, of course, a ceasefire has been established, but Hamas still remains armed. The truce has continued for 2 months, though both sides accuse each other of violations. Hamas must not only observe the ceasefire but also fulfill its obligations to disarm and demilitarize the Gaza Strip. Because after the ceasefire, everyone suddenly forgot the main terms of the peace agreement, and it was clearly stated there that Hamas should not exist. Under the first stage of Trump's plan, Israel retains control over 53% of Gaza's territory in exchange for the release of hostages and Palestinian prisoners. In the second stage, Israel must withdraw even further from the Gaza Strip to establish a temporary administration in Gaza, deploy multinational armed security forces, completely disarm Hamas, and begin the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. All of this is part of the second stage. A multinational coordination center is already set up in Israel, but progress has stalled due to the lack of deadlines. And now I'll give you a quote from Netanyahu, a very short but very meaningful quote. Which forces will enter? Will there be international troops? If not, what are the alternatives? These are all central questions. And, it's just crazy, because all these questions should have been resolved even before the peace agreement was signed. Many criticize Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan for this reason. It's unclear what to do next, how to disarm HAMAS or remove them, which troops will enter, what the interim government will be, when this will happen, and what alternatives exist if plans fail. None of these questions have answers. And Ukraine should take a close look at this situation, because they're trying to push exactly the same kind of peace agreement with the Russians on us. A few months ago, I said that when Steve Witkoff was made the key negotiator for the peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, Witkoff would push exactly the same deal that he pushed for the Gaza Strip, and it would be rewritten. But the point is exactly the same: to establish peace at any cost, and then not care at all about what happens next. The situation may get worse in a year, but what's important is now. Such a peace plan suggests that the parties don't even understand how to implement it at all. Trump's team promised to disarm Hamas, but they didn't specify how or when it would be done. Now Netanyahu is asking these questions. Since the ceasefire began, Israel has launched airstrikes, claiming self-defense against attacks and targeting militant infrastructure. Like, if Trump doesn't do it, then Israel will. Israel will always insist on security control over Western countries. On the other hand, Trump promised Muslim leaders that Israel would not annex the occupied West Bank, where the Netanyahu government supports the construction of Jewish settlements, not Netanyahu himself. He stated that the issue of political annexation remains on the negotiating table. And now Trump has just shifted the focus in another direction. A peace plan, everything is fine, to disarm HAMAS, and he promised. But what did he promise next? He shifts the focus. The United States, Israel, and Qatar will hold a trilateral meeting in New York to restore relations after the failed Israeli strike in Doha. Why is all this important? This is the highest level meeting between the countries since the agreement to end the war in Gaza, in which Qatar played a key mediating role. It is taking place as the Trump administration prepares to announce that the peace process in the Gaza Strip is moving to a new stage. The meeting is being held by White House envoy Stephen Witkoff. Israel will be represented by Mossad chief David Bourne, and an as yet unnamed senior Qatari official will also join the talks. The United States has proposed a trilateral mechanism for addressing grievances and strengthening collective efforts to prevent threats. Netanyahu stated that as part of this initiative, he intends to raise the issue of Qatar's support for the Muslim Brotherhood, hostility towards Israel in broadcasts by Al Jazeera, which is funded by Qatar, and Qatar's alleged support for anti-Israeli sentiments on American college campuses. But still, the meeting will be largely focused on implementing the peace agreement on Gaza, particularly on the disarmament of HAMAS. It's important to note here that at one time Qatar made payments to HAMAS. What is known for sure is that from 2018 to 2023 these funds were provided for the purpose of governing the Gaza Strip. However, these payments also went toward funding and building up the group's military power, and became the cause of serious disputes after the attacks on October 7. Meanwhile, several of Netanyahu's closest advisors are under investigation on suspicion of receiving money from Qatar to strengthen the image of this Persian Gulf state in Israel and internationally, including during the war itself. But Donald Trump also wants to reconcile Israel with Egypt. The White House is prepared to mediate a summit between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. By the way, they haven't communicated with each other since the start of the war in Gaza. But first, Netanyahu must approve a strategic gas deal with Egypt and take a number of other steps to convince Sisi to meet with him. And now the Americans insist that selling gas to Egypt will create interdependence, bring the countries closer together, strengthen peace, and prevent war. I already said exactly the same thing in one of the previous episodes. Now they're trying to impose this idea on Ukraine, telling Ukrainians, look, America will start doing business with the unwashed Russians, and then, well, Russia simply won't be interested in continuing the war because it won't want to lose such business. And I've already talked about this in previous episodes, that Angela Merkel, the former Chancellor of Germany, believed in exactly the same scheme. She insisted, listen, let's make it so that Europe becomes dependent on Russian gas. We will do business with the Russians, make a million deals with the Kremlin and so on, and create an atmosphere where business is above everything else. Business as usual, that was her favorite saying. And in that environment, who would be foolish enough to want war and risk losing the vast European market? Well, it turned out that Merkel was wrong, and Donald Trump is now following exactly the same well-trodden path, but he doesn't understand where all this will eventually lead. And now they're pushing this idea on us in Ukraine. And they're doing the same with Israel, saying, listen, just do business with everyone, and everything will be great. The United States is considering similar initiatives aimed at economic stimulation in areas such as technology and energy between Israel and Arab countries like Lebanon, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. The goal is to bring Israel out of isolation through diplomatic means, to create a new model of interaction between Israel and the Arab world, and to get the Abraham Accords back on track. American officials hope to achieve this in parallel with efforts to stabilize the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and to continue the peace process. And here, the publication Axios writes today that President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, told Netanyahu that after the war, Israel needs to show the countries in the region that it can offer something more than just a negative agenda. Kushner emphasized that the countries in the region do not want to constantly talk about Iran, but rather are looking into business opportunities. If Israel wants to fit into the region, it needs to return to speaking this language, says Kushner. In short, while Israel is demanding that Trump move toward real implementation of the peace plan in Gaza, Trump is urging Israel to simply do business with all the countries in the region. Who wants peace and who just wants business? I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to like. And let me remind you, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. I will be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.